I never thought I'd get into politics, not in a million years. But when I did, I quickly found out that nobody makes it on their own, especially in the fight for big structural change to our economy and to our democracy. That if you're going to do good, the kind of good that actually changes people's lives, changes power structures, then you need partners who aren't afraid of a good fight. And that is why I am here today with David. I've worked with David Segal on plans to level the economic playing field. We've worked to support a responsible foreign policy, and we've worked to build a government that Americans can trust to work for them. Like me, David is a deep believer in the fact that personnel is policy, and he's fought in the trenches with me and with others to get economic policymakers who have real ambition about what we can do to rebuild the middle class and put them in positions of power in Washington. He has fought against concentration. He's fought against the corruption that has brought our economy and our government to where it is today. David has been in this fight. He is just the kind of fighter I love. A moral, principled man who knows how to fight and knows how to win. I see it right now as we are in an uphill battle to hold on to our majority, to expand it in the House and the Senate, and to create an economy and a government that breaks this cycle of greater and greater concentration, more and more corporate power, and instead a government that works for everyone. If we don't do this, our nation is in real trouble. But I'm here because I'm fundamentally optimistic. I believe that we can win, and I believe that we can make a difference. But to do that, we need candidates, we need leaders like David. We need David making decisions at policy tables.
And so, to say the least, it's clear that we live in challenging times, and it's more important than ever that we do more than just call out corruption and corporations and the far right. We need to win elections. Like, winning elections is the only way that we're going to be able to fix our country's problems. And to win elections, we need to do more than just be better than the other side. We need a clear agenda that helps middle class and working class and lower income people. And we need to look for points of commonality around which we can build broad coalitions and deliver wins for everyday people. And I think corporate power concerns are a place where we have notable ability to do just this. And we need to be honest about the corrosive influence of corporate spending in our political system and not just say, oh, well, that's how the game is played, because working families know that they lose every single time the game is played that way. So I'm just struck always, and particularly profoundly this week and over the last couple of weeks as we've seen the end of this Supreme Court session, by the sophistication of the right-wing project over recent decades and the limited equivalent organizing and sometimes muted response from progressives, at least until recently. And the right has implemented a generations-long strategy to take over and shape the federal government in service of corporate power. And that's also intertwined with reactionary social and civil rights politics. And it's multifaceted. There's no way to reduce it to a couple of key points, but I'm going to try here and focus on three elements of the program. So first, there's a focus on building pipeline of what you might call fusionist judges who sit at the conjunction of corporatism and right-wing social policy. So we have a pact between economic libertarians and hard right social conservatives to populate the court with people who are going to strip away civil rights of everyday people. And just in the last week or so, we've seen this around Dobbs and Roe and with some Voting Rights Act cases and beyond, while also enshrining the rights of corporations to do whatever they want. And moreover, this pact means that you have people who have conservative, religious, and social beliefs voting for an economic agenda that they might not otherwise support. Second, there's an effort to, let's say, decapitate Congress. And this was a key facet of the Gingrich project. Congress loses expertise. It becomes a more difficult place to work in. Staff pay goes down. We eliminate functions like the Office of Technology Assessment. And so expertise and the void therein is filled by lobbyists and the right-wing think tank ecosystem, and becomes easier for K Street to capture staffers who can't raise a family on $45,000 or whatever. And third, we have a focus on installing an ideological executive branch. And you, of course, Senator, have in recent years popularized the notion that personnel is policy and that we need the right people in place in order to get the right policy outcomes. But I think one thing that's so interesting, given how much this is associated with your great work, is that the phrase came to prominence during the transition into the Reagan administration. Mm-hmm. And I think was first coined by his personnel director, Scott Faulkner. And it was part of an effort by the hard right Reaganites to push out more moderate Republicans. So here we are living with the legacy of all of this, more clearly than ever, I think, over the course of the last couple of weeks. And so now I have a compound question for you. First is just, would you agree with that, broadly speaking, as an analysis of how we got here? And do you think that we're beginning to see signs that we're at least starting to shift the dynamics or have the potential to, and what might be some paths forward?
So yes, I think that you put your finger on it when you talk about this alliance between not just social conservatives. Can we just sharpen that a little bit on really extremist social conservatives and the corporatists? And they figured out, both of them, that in a straight up, go to the American people and say, this is what I stand for. I really want to reduce regulations on giant corporations. I want the big ones to be able to be have total market control and operate like monopolies. They're going to lose. And the same thing is true for people who just stand up and say, I'm going to run on Roe versus Wade, and I'm going to run, turning it over. I'm going to run on making sure that the government intrudes on whatever happens in someone's bedroom. They can't win those, or couldn't, for 10, 20, 30 years. So they use the courts as a place to go. And it really was an alliance between the two, money and organization and energy. And the two pushed over and over and over. And we watched the Republicans do the wink, wink, nod, nod as one nominee after another comes in that has been pre-screened, says all the right things in front of the American people. Roe versus Wade is settled law. Precedent is really important. And then as soon as they get the votes, they're gone. I see this as the moment that we really have come to the fork in the road. And one of two things is going to happen. Either the Republicans are going to seize complete control. They're going to get control of our federal government. And if they do, Clarence Thomas, Mitch McConnell, Mike Pence have told us exactly where they want to go. They are not content just to overturn Roe versus Wade. They want to ban abortion all across the country. They're coming after LGBTQ rights. They're coming after contraception. And it never gets elevated in the same way, but they're doing the same thing on the corporate side and have already done a big part of it. Elevate money, elevate the influence of corporations, all pushing in the same direction, and undercut voting rights. Because if the majority rules, none of this stuff would happen. Mm-hmm. So that's the package on the right. But here's the reason I have this seed of optimism. And that is, we turn this in the other direction. We get in this fight for the next 4 months and a week, and we just pound it. And if we can keep the House, maybe even expand our majority a little bit, but just keep the House and get 2 more Democratic senators who will get rid of the filibuster, then all of a sudden, the dominoes start to fall in the other direction. And it's Roe versus Wade, and it's voting rights, and it's climate, and it's strengthening again the role of government to be a check on these giant corporations. It's once again getting a government that doesn't just operate for those who already have money and power, but a government that really is about the investments in our public schools, about a progressive tax system, and how those pieces fit together. So I think that was the answer to both parts of your question, and that is, yeah, we see this the same way, but I also see there is a path out of this. We're not guaranteed to win it. Shoot, it's going to be hard. Nobody says this is downhill and easy sailing, but there really is a path out of this. That's why I'm here with you today. That's why I want to see you strong in this fight, representing the Democrats in Rhode Island, and then coming to Washington, not to do years more of same old, let's just not rock the boat, let's help out business. We want to be business friendly, which is a code word often for the monopolists instead of the small businesses. It's that you're there, you know what you want to fight for, you've got the vision, and personnel is policy, not only in the people we appoint for these roles in the administration, but also for the people who represent us in Congress. So yes, David, and you are what make me optimistic that we can get this done.
Thank you very much. Do you have another minute or two for?
Sure. Yeah, I got a few more minutes here.
Okay.
I'm good.
One thing that is interesting to me, and this comes up in the context of my race, is of course we feel very polarized as a society right now, but there are also these moments of commonality, and the polarization in some ways is a function of the media ecosystem, the social media ecosystem, and so on. But we have these moments where we see broad support for what you or I might call like progressive populist policies around certain economic considerations. I think that your wealth tax proposal, for instance, has at least plurality support even among Republicans in polling that I've seen. Yep. That doesn't map to members of Congress necessarily. But we do see around these questions of monopoly broad support on the ground in terms of the rank and file electorate, and that actually even manifesting in terms of who's in office. For the most part, when we try to build a majority around anti-monopoly legislation, we're getting mostly Democrats, but there's a non-trivial number of Republicans.
Yep. A pretty large majority of Americans want to see us crack down on monopolies, want to see us confront price gouging head on, understand that corporate power is running roughshod over their lives. And yet, you'd think in a democracy, when you're getting 60, 70, 80% of Americans saying, yeah, I'm strongly for that, you would think that that would mean that a representative government would pass those laws, strengthen those regulations, and get it done. And I think this goes to the core corruption of the system right now. And let's just be blunt about it. A big part of this is just money. And when I say money, it's money in 50 different ways. The one that comes to mind, of course, immediately is money in terms of campaign contributions. But it's so much more than this. It's the money that funds a tax on anyone who steps out of line. So the Supreme Court helps out here by permitting dark money to pour into our elections. And that means these so-called independent political action committees can just beat the tar out of anyone who doesn't follow the corporate line. Or pick another one, money on what happened with taxes. Not only were there huge tax breaks for the wealthy, that was the one thing that Trump got done. And I don't know if you remember at the time reading the things where there were various congressmen who actually stood up in the Republican caucus and said, hey, I've had my donors calling and saying, if we don't deliver on this, they're never going to give us any more money. Hello, do we understand what's going on here? But think through the rest of the implications. When you keep cutting and cutting and cutting the money that comes into government, then that means, just like you say, we end up with staffers who can't afford to work for the government. We end up with regulators who can't afford it unless they already made a fortune somewhere else and are completely inculcated in the corporate approach to every issue. So I think what we've got is a system that is functioning great for those at the top and just not functioning for anyone else, not for mid-sized businesses, not for small businesses, not for entrepreneurs, not for working families, not for middle-class families, not for poor families. It's just the rest of America. But here's the difference. I think there are a lot of people who are waking up to that. And whether the issue is Roe that woke them up, whether the issue is climate that wakes them up, whether the issue is guns that wake them up. People talk about how Democrats have all these different issues, but in a sense, they all tie back to the same point. They all tie back to where is power in government. And so I'll say it one more time. It's why I'm glad to be here with you. It's why I volunteer to come and help you. This is what I want to do, because we need people in government who are not beholden to the corporate interests and who can take the step back and say it is possible in this system to raise the voices of those for whom this government is supposed to work, for the people, for small businesses, for an economy that's generating opportunity, not just for those at the top, but for everyone. So I think that's what we're about here.
30 seconds on inflation.
Sure.
I saw your exchange with Powell. Even he admits that the interest rate hikes aren't going to do anything about energy prices, commodity prices. What do we need to do?
Look, I think of this like somebody just walked into the emergency room and they said, I've got a broken bone. And the doctor rushes in and starts setting the wrist. And the person says, it's my leg. What Powell's got is he's got one tool. And his tool is to raise interest rates. So he's also got a little bit of monetary policy stuff related, but that's not on the table right now. He's got this tool to raise interest rates. And what that tool does is it really dampens business investment. And the idea behind it is to put people out of work and to cut back hours. In other words, make Americans poorer. Now, I think that's a real problem here, because the causes of inflation right now, and I think the economists are finally mostly starting to come together on this, are supply chain problems, problems that COVID is still shutting down various parts of the world that tangles the supply chain again, just when you think you have it unkinked. The war, Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine that has driven up energy prices, and goes to an issue that you and I talk about on a regular basis, and that is corporate power, where these giant corporations have said, wow, as long as everyone's talking about inflation, let's raise prices an extra margin and just improve our overall profits. Nothing that Powell is doing changes any of those factors that are driving inflation. So I am concerned, and I said it in the hearing, that what's worse than low unemployment and high inflation is that we end up with high unemployment and high inflation, because they're moving two different parts. And I'm concerned about Powell potentially tipping the economy into a recession. So the good news is, this is a place where, because of much of the work you and I've done on personnel as policy, we've got good people on the ground who are dealing with supply chain, who are dealing with COVID, and who are fighting back against the price gouging. Go get them, Lena. And I think over time, it's going to start to bring the inflation problem under control. I just hope the Fed doesn't create additional economic problems before we get there. So that's where I am on this. So I got to run right now. Can I say something to everybody who's joined us today, David, just before I leave?
Yes,
I really do. I really do want to say how grateful I am that David agreed to run for public office. You know, it's a lot easier not to get out there in front. But David is someone who has worked really hard on these issues for a very long time. He's a person of principle who knows what he fights for, and he's a person with courage, which we could use a lot more of in Washington. For everybody who's on this call, keep in mind that he runs against people who get a lot of money from big corporations, directly or indirectly, who would be a lot happier with one of his opponents. So please, you've come here today, do what else you can. Dig a little deeper, pitch in a little more. Campaigns are expensive, and the way that we get elected representatives who will represent the people is for people to support them. So please do what you can. And David, good luck in this, and call on me again. I'm here to help.
Will do. Thanks so much for your support and moreover the work you do every day. And in moments like this, I know it's giving hope to so many people, not just as an abstraction, but because they see what you're doing, what you stand for, and what you're achieving.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.